Take. I am your co-host Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we will be breaking down the top receivers in this year's draft class. But before we get into that, Ryan and I, we have a goal of getting to 1,000 subscribers by the NFL draft. We're sitting at 577. We're getting close to about 250 new subscribers since the start of this year, so we're growing at a rapid pace. Keep growing our community. We absolutely love the conversations and the dialogue, even if they are some more unfriendly comments. We still enjoy them. We also love the friendly comments and the debates that go on back and forth. So check out our channel, check out our videos, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. It is the best way to help out the channel with the algorithm, what every other aspiring YouTube guys say, just help us out. We would appreciate it. So, and ring that bell as well so you can get notified when Ryan and I release new content. And Ryan, with that being said, let's tell the viewers what we're going to be doing today. So we have chosen 4 receivers, just the top 4 receivers, general consensus of this year's draft. Maybe a little controversial on the 4th one, but the first 3 are definitely going to be considered the top 3. Yeah. And we're going to go through each one and give our opinion on why they're the number 1 and why they're not. And at the end, we're going to debate on who we believe the best receiver is in the draft. And so we're going to try and do our best to keep you guessing the entire show. But we're going to start out with Quentin Johnston, then Jaxon Smith-Njigba, then Jordan Addison, and then we're going to round it out with Zay Flowers as the 4th receiver. And so honorable mention to Jalin Hyatt. We had a back and forth going on who we should include, but we decided to go Zay Flowers because in January when we decided to do this episode, we had Zay Flowers. So we just thought we'd just stick with it. So leave a comment on why you think Jalin Hyatt is better than Zay Flowers. But with that being said, if you have not already, fair, okay, Ryan's opinion on that one now.
Yeah.
If you have not already, hit that subscribe button, help us out, and let's get into Quentin Johnston, who is by far he has the most physically gifted tools.
Yeah,
and you had a good point as well. Is like he fits the mold of what a modern NFL receiver today is: tall, slender,
the
super wide wingspan. Like I'm looking at it now, he's got 33 5/8-inch arms. I think he jumped 40 and a half feet. 40 and a half inches.
40 and a half feet would be
40 and a half feet. He would be first overall pick, hands down.
Yeah.
$100 million a year contract. Like, hey, just go in the end zone and then just jump.
Yeah.
So he'd have some flubber shoes on. That's a nice 90s reference for you. But anyways, he's coming from TCU, and he is the epitome. Not the epitome, but I think it's a great start with him to kind of represent how weird this receiver class is, because on paper and in past couple of years, he would be the hands down number 1 first receiver, potentially top 10.
100%.
Just because with his mold. But then you combine it then with JSN, who had his sophomore year, but then was hurt all this year. So now is his stock dropping? Who could maybe contend for that number 1? But now people are questioning his ability.
Yeah.
And so it's really weird how this receiver class is, because then you can honestly go 10 receivers deep, and these guys are a little bit better than them, but not like in the past couple of years where it's Jamar Chase, DeVonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, who are clearly better than receivers 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
So I think he's a good start to kind of this discussion on why he might be the number 1 receiver.
No, yeah. So for me, what makes him the number 1 receiver is his physical skill set. Obviously, being 6'4", 205, I think he weighed in at the combine.
His combine height right here, 6'3", 208 pounds, arms 33 5/8 inches, and then 9 and 5/8 inches were his hands.
Okay, and so to be able to be 6'3", 208 pounds, jump out the gym like that with a 40-inch vertical, it really is. He is just a physical specimen. He is as elite of an athlete as I think we've seen in the draft lately. I think you look at him, and to me, physically, Calvin Johnson comparisons come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Just like standing next to each other, yes, that could be your comparison. However, I think where he really fails is on tape. He struggles to utilize those tools. So, for example, when you watch him in contested catch situations, which, by the way, he did not do well in. So he had a 34.8% contested catch rate, which is below average, actually.
Yeah.
And so when you watch him in contested catch situations, he doesn't use that 40-inch vertical coupled with that 6'3" frame. He doesn't box out corners very well. He's not physical at the catch point. He just hasn't put it all together yet. And so he's just this extremely raw talent who has physical tools just out of this world.
Yeah.
In a way, it kind of reminds me of Cordell Patterson coming out of Tennessee, where Cordell Patterson made millions upon millions of dollars in the NFL just utilizing his physical tools. And he was never quite able to put together the actual receiver side of that. Part of that was, I think, he went to a dwindling Minnesota team that didn't necessarily have the coaching staff to bring his play up. But if Quentin Johnston goes to that situation, that they can coach him up on his routes, they can coach him up on extending at the catch point and being more physical with corners. Because, by the way, in the NFL, they let receivers get away with almost anything now. So I think if he goes to a place that can coach him up and help him with that, I think, yes, he is the number one wide receiver in this class. If he goes to a place like New England, who is notorious for not being able to coach up wide receivers, I think he's a bust. I think he's a Cordell Patterson 2.0. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. As a Falcons fan, I'm insulted. Patterson's had a pretty good resurgence of his career.
Exactly. Resurgence of his career.
But also, too, and he's on a Falcons team that hasn't made the playoffs. And that's the thing what's interesting, too, about Johnston, because I think it's almost kind of the theme of this draft. Because even then, if you look at the quarterback situation as well, with Richardson and Levis, and who they have all the physical tools, they have the mold of what an NFL player at this position should be. But there are a lot of concerns and questions. And the biggest one for me, and I agree with you, he fits that build. We've seen him do super athletic things. However, though, in my opinion, leave a comment if I'm wrong, but I've always kind of been under the assumption that the Big 12 is probably one of the weaker defenses of the conferences. And he only had 1,000-yard season. That was his senior year, and that includes the stats from the playoff games. He only had a couple 100-yard games. His biggest game was against Kansas, which is arguably one of the worst defenses in the league. And if you go down the list of games, he only had let me pull up his stats here just so I can be exact, his game log here. So he had 1, 2, 3, 4 games over 100 yards. The Kansas game, Oklahoma State game. Kansas State game he did, in which they lost that game, but that's obviously not his fault. And then the Michigan game, 163 yards with the touchdown. And his touchdown was an 80-yard bubble screen that was a broken down coverage from Michigan. So all the other games, though, he has so many games with just 20 yards, 40 yards. And when I say that, and before you blow me up in the comments, I am fully aware of his quarterback.
I was going to say.
I totally get that. I totally get that. However, though, with how big his frame is, though, and how weak the defenses are, I would have thought that these stats would have been a little bit different, which draws a little bit more question. We go and look.
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb might not be the best comparison. He did have Baker Mayfield and then Kyler Murray as his quarterback, right? No.
Jalen Hurts.
That's who it was. That's who. I knew they were all.
I thought he had Kyler Murray and then Jalen Hurts.
I think that's what it was.
I
might have been a year off.
Yeah.
Totally different quarterback system, obviously in a Lincoln Riley type offense as well. But still going up against those similar type defenses. And so I would have thought that there would have been a little bit more, I would just say consistent production. If it was 1,000 yards, but 80 to 90 yards a game.
I would say some, or if not half of the reasoning behind that. I think if you watch his non-highlights, I think you will see a more sophisticated receiver than what is led on in his highlight reels. Because I think in his highlight reels, you see a lot of crossers, getting him over the middle, getting him in space, letting him catch the ball and then try to create. Whereas I think if you watch him on tape, Max Duggan doesn't really know how to throw a fade route. He doesn't really know how to hit a receiver outside the numbers. He has the arm strength to do it. It's just not something that he excels at. He also was extremely impatient, and he wouldn't let Quentin Johnston's routes develop. So on tape, when you watch him when he's not getting the ball, he is actually creating the separation that you want to see.
Okay.
It's just in the nature of being an X receiver in the NFL, you are going to have to win contested catch situations. You're going to have to be physical. You're going to have to you're going to have to be able to win route after route. And he has the ability to do that. You just see like little snippets of it here and there, because there are certain plays where he knows he's not getting the ball, so he just takes it off. But then there are plays where he actually wins on his route, and Max Duggan is looking at Steve Avila blocking. Like there's a lot of cases of things like that.
And that goes back to where it's some of it is you definitely see the potential, as where it's not as in, this might be a kind of the segue into Jaxon Smith-Njigba is when he was healthy, and then he had other competitive receivers by him as well. With a competent QB, the numbers were there. So, but with Quentin Johnston, though, you can move him around. You said he is going to be an X receiver, and this is one of the things on how versatile he can be. But then I can see him lining up in slot on certain plays, lining up on the other side, moving him around a lot. And that's where I think a lot of that potential is. And that's why it's interesting. Putting him at the number one is solely for me based off the true potential of what he can bring to a team.
Yeah. And he has top 5 NFL receiver potential. He just needs to go to a destination that knows what they're doing with receivers that can mold him and make him a great receiver, because he's still very raw. He has a good release package, but that's about it. They run a very simple route scheme at TCU. I heard in an interview that a lot of his routes were locked, which basically means he ran no option routes, where he was reading the leverage of the defensive back and the rotation of the defense at all. Not that they really rotate defenses much in the Big 12, because, like you said, those defenses are not very good. But a lot of his routes were locked, so he never has had to make those quick reads in game. But again, if he can get in a situation where they are very good at molding and creating top-tier wide receivers, I think that is a extremely good situation for him, and that is what will make him a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL one day.
Yeah.
So,
I absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of potential there, and I think he can be, and very well could be the number one receiver taken in this draft class. And there's a lot of growth and potential there, which I think the teams are going to see. And so, but let's move on though now to the second receiver, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And I want to make it very clear as well as we're going through this list. These are just the orders based off Tankathon on where they have them ranked. We're going to give our opinion on where we would rank these 4 receivers. So Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Before we do that, if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and also ring that bell so you can see when Ryan and I release new content. JSN, Ohio State Buckeye, did not really – his 2022 season was – I think he had a couple of catches, but like I said, let's not really talk too much about that. Injuries happen in the game. I think if he was healthy, and even if he had not as good a year as 2021, and by that I mean only 1,200 receiving yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns. How many touchdowns did he have? And
16, I think.
And no, he 1,600 receiving.
9 touchdowns. Yeah, he had 9 touchdowns. Oh, you're freezing again.
9 touchdowns. I think that this would be a no doubt in the class, because he'd be the most polished and would.
You're freezing for me.
question marks as well. Did I just cut out there?
No, I think you're still going on the stream, but you're freezing for me. Yeah, you're freezing again.
Okay. Yeah, shoot, my internet. Thoughts on JSN?
I'm sorry, was that a lead-in? Hello? Tyler.
Yeah.
You there? I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. My internet just keeps cutting in and out here.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Let's start over on JSN.
Okay, go ahead.
So Jaxon Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver from Ohio State, didn't play all that much in 2022, and he had a phenomenal 2021. So his stats were 13 games, 95 receptions for 1,606 yards and 9 touchdowns. And the way he did it was phenomenal. I will say he had a lot of talent around him. However, I think that really showed up in the Utah game when it was just him and Marvin Harrison Jr., where he was really able to show his true skill set and the fact that he wasn't a benefactor of having Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave on the field. So for me, I think he is wide receiver 1, not just because he proved that, but then I think you couple that with his game tape of being able to set up corners, being able to break off routes over the middle, catching the ball and adjusting for after the catch. I just think he's a really polished slot receiver, and he has wide receiver 1 upside, and I think he could really, really take over a game in the NFL in year 1. So, we lost Tyler officially there. So I'll just keep talking about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So at the combine, he ran. Oh, Tyler's back. How's it going?
Sorry. Yeah, I just went to a hotspot on my phone here.
Phone. No, you're good.
Yeah. Hope that'll help out.
Okay. But no, so I was just saying Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I think, is wide receiver 1 because he's the most polished prospect with, I think, the most upside in this draft class. So
yeah. Sorry, I might have missed a little bit of that, but that's where I think he is probably the most polished of them all right now. He's probably the most finished product. But there's that question, just that 1 year of just real consistency, and so that's where if he would have had the 2 years back to back, then it would have been hands down. It'd probably be top 10 pick, even though he's primarily going to be a slot receiver. But what's interesting though about it, and you had a good point though, is he is built like a running back. His combine, it was 6 feet, I believe, it was 197 pounds, which, and to me, that is like the premier size of making him something like a Deebo Samuel. He's probably going to be a little bit slower than that, where you can have him in the backfield, but just that versatility of him running out of the backfield with how quick he is, especially doing those 3-cone drills and the 20-yard shuttle. He beat the next closest guy in those drills by about 2/10 or 3/10, depending on which drill you were looking at. So he has that great burst of speed, but it is he does not have the over-the-top game-breaking speed. But he makes up for that, though, which I'm sure you've already said, with that amazing route running, ability to just improvise, find the open spots, break down zones. And then when it's man, he's able to separate very quickly without getting touched. He's so quick off the break. That is his strength. That's absolutely his strength.
So growing up being a Patriots fan, he reminds me so much of a Wes Welker, Julian Edelman slot receiver, where he's just so quick off the ball, where it's almost like the quarterback could get the ball and throw it and they would be open immediately. And he is that. But like you said, his biggest question is, one, health. I think he answered a lot of those questions coming out of the combine. But then two, that top end speed. He didn't run the 40. He has explosiveness in terms of one short area ability, but he did perform well in the vertical, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
With
actually,
did he not participate in the vertical?
No, I think he just did the here.
He just did the 3-cone and the shuttle, which he took first in both. So,
yeah. Well, and that was kind of a joke from what I've been seeing is, and correction, sorry, he was 6 feet 1 inches and 196 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all like he knew exactly what he was going to score, and he did not want to be ranked next to these other guys. So he only wanted to do the ones that were going to be beneficial to him, which, hey, I don't blame him. I mean, it's a business. Yeah. He's trying to look, he is trying to look the best for all of the scouts and everything.
You also
he did do a vertical jump of 35 inches, which was 5 inches less than Quentin Johnston. But Quentin Johnston is also 2 inches taller, and arms are 3 inches longer as well.
Yeah.
So
no. And so that for me is he did what he's good at. I think you know what he is coming into the NFL. And this is why I think teams like New England, who struggle to develop wide receiver talent, should be extremely interested in a guy like Jaxon Smith-Njigba, because you know what you're going to get. He fits the scheme that you want to play, and he's very good at it. He had very few drops in 2021. He didn't really have enough targets to be considered in that drop category in 2022. But he's extremely polished coming to you. And I think teams who are looking for that slot option, I think you can not go wrong with Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
Yeah. Well, it especially any team here that I'm looking at from, I know I've mocked the Packers taking him because I think that he would be a perfect fit for how great of a route running he is, to go along with the speed of Christian Watson on the outside. I could see him getting drafted as early as then. I could see the Texans maybe drafting him as well. However, that's where it's a little bit different, just kind of based off need. Then I'm also, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but a string of receivers coming off in the 20th.
Early 20s.
In the early to mid 20s. And I can see a team, I can see a team like Baltimore taking him there as well. I can see Minnesota taking him also to be opposite of what Justin Jefferson is, as they already have their elite receiver, but then go have your absolute like precision route running guy in Jaxon Smith-Njigba as well. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see where he falls. I'm curious on kind of what the overall consensus is going to be as we get closer to draft day, because a lot of people I think are very hot and cold on him just because like he didn't play. But I think it's just an interesting argument because we're only a couple years removed of the COVID years and how guys didn't play in college for a whole year, and that didn't really affect their draft stock at all. Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell. Now they weren't coming off a hamstring injury as well, but I think hamstring injuries you have to nurse. They're taking a little bit longer to heal, and so I think having a whole year to kind of rest and prepare, and I think based off the 3-cone and the shuttle, seems like they're working perfectly fine based off his route running and drills in the combine seem perfectly fine as well. So it's I'm curious kind of what the overall consensus is going to be as we get closer to April, because I've been high on JSN for a really long time now.
Yeah.
And so I still think that he's there, especially with what all the other receivers are showing us.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, he's had a hype train rolling since that Utah game a little over a year ago. So let's wrap JSN up there, and let's move on now to the third prospect on our list, and that is Jordan Addison, the wide receiver from Pitt/USC, because we're going to talk about both of those years here. Measured in at the combine a little under what we all had hoped. He was listed at 6 foot 183 or 185 at USC. Measured in at 5'11", 173. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot. However, that's 10-ish pounds lighter than what he was listed at. 5'11" and 6 foot is a pretty big difference in terms of NFL wide receivers. He does have 30 and 7/8 inch arms.
Yeah.
But he has small hands at 8 3/4 inch. So
yeah, the biggest thing for me is the weight aspect of it. I think 1 inch, I don't think it's as big a deal, but the extra weight I think is what's going to be. And that being said, the first thing that came to my mind with Devontae Smith, that has not been an issue, but I also think he is the exception and not the rule. And so with this size, definitely leaning more towards obviously a slot type receiver. I think
he's a true Z in my opinion. Okay. So you have an X, a Z, and then your slot receiver. Your Z receiver is the guy that's going to play kind of on his own, where he has more space to create, and he is usually lined up in the backfield, like off the line of scrimmage, and isn't given press coverage nearly as much. Mm-hmm. And I think I was kind of concerned about that for him. What are you doing?
I'm here.
Oh, it sounded like you were hitting your mic or something.
Oh, no. Sorry.
So for me, he is locked into that option, because I think even in the slot, I think he would take too much of a beating over the middle. And we saw some of that at USC, where he was struggling later in games because he was so beaten up from having to go over the middle. And that for me is a big concern with that weight. He has the route running and football acumen to be an elite receiver at the next level. I'm just really concerned about his size.
Yeah. Well, and that's a concern for me as well. The thing that gives me positive and why I think there's a good argument for him to be the number one receiver taken off the board and in this class is very few receivers have this opportunity to say this, but he has been successful under two different quarterbacks and under two totally different systems and two totally different conferences. Kenny Pickett was first quarterback taken last year, and he had in the 2021 season with him, he had just shy of 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. And the key for me, he had 100 catches during that year, so average 15.9 yards. This year with in the Pac-12 with Caleb Williams, he had essentially almost half the production, 59 catches, 875 yards with 8 touchdowns, but the yards per catch only dropped 1 yard to 14.8. So to me, it kind of goes to what you were saying as well. He is still an outside receiver who can go and create space, and we did see that. I think his drops dropped significantly while at USC, and I think that is kind of the growth of the veteran aspect. Just maybe it was a young receiver and everything. That being said, though, even the drops he had at Pittsburgh, they still kept throwing it to him, and it wasn't too much of an issue, with the 100 catches.
I mean, he was the Blitnikoff Award winner.
Yeah, so
two seasons ago. So
that's pretty good. And so that to me, if I'm an NFL exec, a GM looking at a guy, this guy seems like a chameleon when it comes to different types of systems. You can go from an ACC system, then you can go to a Lincoln Riley type system and be successful, be the leading receiver. You can go play with more of a designated pocket type quarterback in Kenny Pickett. Well, let me rephrase that. More of the modern day type quarterback,
where he's a pocket quarterback that's mobile.
Pocket quarterback that's mobile. And then you can also go play with who in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to talking about him a lot next year, but looks like a mini Patrick Mahomes, just kind of the way he plays, a lot of improvisation. And so that might be one thing he needs to work on a little bit is the improvisation that we saw at USC, but I forget the YouTube channel's name, but he had a really good point about it. It might just need to take some time to get used to that system playing with Caleb Williams. So I think once he gets into a system, he will get used to the tendencies of the quarterbacks in there, because we've seen him be successful. He went from his freshman year of 60 catches, 666 yards with Kenny Pickett as a QB, then to over doubling that production, after he got used to the system and everything. So maybe that just takes time. He is a very just consistent receiver, 4.49 at 40, and really good at route running. He just seems like he has the good speed. I just hope that the weight doesn't hold him back. I just hope that his size doesn't hold him back.
That for me is the concern, is that it is. He actually is. I think Devontae Smith is a really good comparison because Devontae Smith is at this size. He's actually a little, like, he's like 7 pounds lighter.
I think he's a little taller. Is he like
he's 6 foot, like 165 is what he measured in at. And he was just, However, he ran like a 4.38 or like a very low 4.4s. He's faster. He's a little bit taller. I just worry about him as a prospect because late in games, later in the season, is he going to be that same receiver after he gets beaten up? Because this is not the Pac-12 anymore where you're going up against no-name corners and 230-pound linebackers.
Yeah.
He's going to get hit harder and more by NFL talent, and I just think that concerns me, especially when you see him kind of fade in games because of the physicality of it. He also was being used more in the slot, and he was taking some bigger hits over the middle. And I think he is more of a true Z receiver in the NFL, where he will be able to do what he's good at and be in space a little bit more on the on his lone side. So
for me, when I look at him, I think of landing spots. I really would love to see him in this Giants offense. I think with Brian Dable, I think he would fit really well. They already have Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to be in the slot. They have whatever veteran journeyman receiver as their ex. And so I think that he would slot in really well. Then you have Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. I think that Dable would be able to utilize him very well. And so that to me, I think would be the ideal landing spot. But that being said, though, I also think if he went to Minnesota, I think he'd be a great opposite complement to what Justin Jefferson is as well. So, I think if you've watched the live stream, and if tonight, I think you can kind of get a scene where I think a lot of these receivers are going to fall. It's going to be in that 20 range, and so and I think that those teams that are there, I think that he would fit very well into that system.
No, I agree. He's one of those guys I could see him going a lot of different places. I think he would fit in well in Seattle, LA. I think he's kind of a Swiss Army knife. I think he just needs to be coached and somewhat protected physically from more imposing defenses. So,
well, and that stuff will take time, and that's what I mean. Shoot, they're now professionals. They're going to be doing this 24/7, 365, and so it's going to be like they're gonna these coaches, they're going to find ways to utilize him and make sure that he stays as healthy as possible, or give him every opportunity to stay as healthy as possible.
So. But let's go ahead. Let's wrap him up there. I think he has very good upside in the NFL. He's definitely a first-round prospect. It's just where in the first round. But let's move on now to our final wide receiver in our top 4, and that is Zay Flowers from Boston College. This was a guy who I had heard of about this time last year because he was rumored to be leaving BC and coming into the draft, but then decided to stay for one more year. And man, his highlights are electric. He is stop, start, 100 miles an hour to 0 to 100. It's actually really impressive to watch, and I think it really shows the value of not just being able to accelerate quickly, but then also stop on a dime. And Zay Flowers' game embodies that, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's unfortunate he was on Boston College, who went 3-9 this year. So because it would have been fun to see him go up against much more meaningful competition, so to say. But you're right. The thing for me of the four receivers that we talked about, he is the fastest 40, 4.42. But then at the same time, he is also the smallest as well. Let me pull this up. 5'9". He's 182 pounds, so he's got about 10 pounds on Jordan Addison. But the shortest arms are 29 and 1/4 inches, and then 9 1/4 inch hands. So he is the one of all the receivers that we've talked about. He is a true slot receiver. JSN, maybe you can make an argument that you can move him around. I don't see him being really anything else outside of a slot receiver here, but I think he's going to be the best pure slot receiver in this draft class just because of how quick he is and the consistency of that with his pretty consistent production during his time at Boston College when there was no talent at all during his really outside of him.
Yeah. No, and that to me I think is what's impressive is he was able to do all of this with very, very little talent. BC has been bad for, I want to say, since Matt Ryan was there.
I think they might have still been bad when he was there.
I mean, it's possible. And with him, I think you just see on tape what he can do with the ball in his hands. And it does remind you a lot of like a Jalen Waddle, in my opinion, of just get the ball in his hands and let him go create. He's just so electric with the ball in his hands. One of the things with him that is concerning, he does have a 10.3% drop rate, which is pretty well below average. You want to see guys really have less than 8. A little over 8 is okay, but once when they start encroaching on that 10%, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
That's a concern. He has the highest drop rate of any of the receivers that we've talked about today. Again, some of that I think could be contributed to bad quarterback play, just not making him have to reach for more than what he should. They usually factor some of that into drop percentage, but it can play a role. He is he's a home run hitter waiting to happen. And to me, like when you watch him on tape, that's all I can see is he can take a slant 65 yards with ease. And to me, that's what separates him from everybody else that we've talked about.
Well, and he would fit a system to me that the one that pops out is Dallas. Because you already have CeeDee Lamb, you already have your number 1 receiver out there. Kind of have a rotational of number 2 receivers with like Michael Gallup or like Noah Brown or who was the other guy they drafted? Jalen Tolbert, but I don't think he saw too much playing time last year.
No, he missed over.
But him in him in the slot in an offense like that, with how much attention CeeDee Lamb brings, where if they can find a way to utilize his speed, so much attention is going to the number 1 receiver where he would be absolutely explosive, just like what you're talking about, where he can take a slant 65 yards to the house. And so that is the type of game-changing ability that he brings to the table, just with his quickness and his speed. The issue for me, though, when looking at him long-term and when you see a team that taking him there, is then you have guys that are later behind him that like Jalen Hyatt, Josh Downs. Do I really want to take him in the first round? You have other guys, Tyler Scott from Cincinnati, who was a similar type receiver. Let me confirm this. 5'10", 177 pounds. I mean, a slot receiver in the NFL who ran a 4.4 40-yard dash. I think was just 0.02 of a second slower than him. So one of the issues for me when I see him going first overall is a team really going to use a first-round pick on him when maybe if we wait a little bit, we can get a Zay Flowers light who can do the exact same things, and maybe we can kind of grow him up. And so that's when my issue when saying Zay Flowers is the number 1. It's nothing against him on his skill ability. It's just that there's so many of him.
Well, to be fair, there's so many of everybody, I think, except Quentin Johnston in this draft. I think even you look at Jaxon Smith-Njigba, it's like, okay, well, you got Parker Washington from Penn State, who is 5'10 and a half, 212 pounds. And then you have Kayshon Boutte from LSU, who actually coming out of high school was the top wide receiver in the class. And then I think you look at Jordan Addison, and he to me almost kind of falls into a more polished Zay Flowers category. And him and Josh Downs are very similar. Josh Downs is like kind of the bridge between Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. So everybody except Quentin Johnston in this class has.
I mean, I can see what you're saying. The only thing, I was looking at it now. Not saying that they're nearly as good as Quentin Johnston, but just his comparisons in this draft. I would put Cedric Tillman up there, A.T. Perry. Also, Xavier Hutchinson is an inch smaller, but similar height same
Xavier
weight,
Hutchinson plays a very different game, though.
He's
He's a big slot.
Yeah.
Xavier Hutchinson actually plays a lot like Jacoby Myers. So I don't know. We've gotten way off topic from. Zay Flowers.
I do see your point about Quentin Johnston, but with Zay Flowers, I think he'll be the first pure slot receiver taken off the board. Will it be the first receiver overall? I don't know. I think the other receivers would have to fall a lot before. It's more likely that all their other receivers fall a lot more than Zay Flowers goes up the board and someone takes him.
I think Zay Flowers is kind of cemented in the mid to late 20s. That 25 to 30 range, I think, is his sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he will most likely be the last one of the 4 that we've talked about today off the board. However, I could see teams liking his skill set, teams with already have a true X receiver. I could actually see teams liking his skill set more than Quentin Johnston's.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, maybe Jaxon Smith-Njigba if they're looking for a true home run hitter. However, JSN he's just so polished. I think Jordan Addison is everything that Zay Flowers does, but a little better.
Yeah. And a little bit taller.
Yeah. And so for me, I really like Zay Flowers as a prospect. I think he's kind of in that weird range where he's an elite athlete. He can definitely play at the NFL level, but he's not the generational receiver that I don't think anybody in this draft is, but he's not close to that. He's not close to a Jalen Waddle coming out of college or like a Devontae Smith. So
yeah. Well, so I think we've already kind of started it, but let's officially move over to our final segment of who we think the number 1 receiver is and kind of rank him. So, but before we get into that, if you've not already, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell notification so you can see when Ryan and I release new content. It's the best way for us to for you to help us to reach our goal of getting to 1,000 subscribers. As Ryan and I, we release about 10 to a dozen videos a week of NFL content. So be sure to subscribe so you can see when we release that content. I feel like we've already kind of talked a little bit about Zay Flowers and how he's probably not going to be number 1. He's going to be the number 1 slot receiver overall. But kind of due to his size, his speed, I think it's going to be kind of a system fit on which team takes him. So I think that leaves about 3 options left, or the other 3 options left in Quentin Johnston, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and Jordan Addison. How are you ranking those 3 and why?
So starting at 3, I'm ranking Jordan Addison. I'm putting Jordan Addison in that 3 spot. He came in a little under what we all thought he would. He ran a little slower than we all thought he would. And while on tape, he is a much more polished route runner than Quentin Johnston, I think you look at the physical upside of Quentin Johnston, and if you're looking for an outside wide receiver, Jordan Addison is not that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you got to go with the Quentin Johnston there. So I'm putting Jordan Addison at 3. Are you in a similar boat?
I can understand that. I personally, honestly, would actually put Quentin Johnston at number 3, just because of there's still a little unknown. I think, especially when it comes to the route running, and that to me, I think is probably the most important part of being a receiver. It's great to have that over the top Tyreek Hill type speed, but if you're struggling to create separation and if you're struggling to get open, that can absolutely be taught. And so then or you can improve on that as well, especially as you get into an NFL system that might fit your needs. But when I look at JSN and Jordan Addison, those guys don't have that issue. And we've seen that on film and everything, how they're able to get open. Jeez
Sorry.
Louise. Yeah. Jeez Louise. Sorry. They are where was I at? Jordan Addison and Jaxon Smith-Njigba can get open from the break. Yes, they don't have that over the top speed, especially JSN. However, though, you watch all of his film from 2021, and he is just burning guys off the line. Yeah. And yes, they catch up to him after he has the ball, but then they catch him after a 15, 20-yard gain already because he accelerates that quickly. Mm-hmm. And that's what separates him that's what separates him from Quentin Johnston, in my opinion. And so Quentin Johnston, yes, has a huge reach, and it would love for him to prove me wrong, because maybe I'll draft him in my fantasy and then I'll win. But I think that just because of the route running question marks, for me, I put Johnston at number 3. Okay. Where do you have Johnston in your board?
So I have Johnston at number 2. I think what he brings to the table is elite. It's not every year. He didn't run a 40, but if he were to have run a 40, I would assume he would have been in the mid 4.4s. It's not every year that you get a 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", 210-pound receiver that's going to run in the 4.4s and have the type of route running potential, because I don't want to say he has the capabilities, because he hasn't necessarily proved that on tape, with the route running potential that he has. If he works out, he could be a Calvin Johnson-esque prospect. However, you just haven't seen it on tape. You haven't seen his ability to win contested catches. You haven't seen his win contested catches consistently. You haven't seen his ability to really read a DB and adjust his route on the fly. Sometimes his releases are one speed, especially when he's running go balls. He doesn't change the pace up to get the DB to stumble or get lackadaisical. But if you can teach him that, he is a top tier true receiver 1 in the NFL.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree that he has the tool sets for sure. And it's going to take some time. It's weird talking to him about almost as like a project piece, even because he should be a day 1 starter no matter who drafts him.
Oh, no, he definitely will be.
Yeah. It's it's that, and that's the appeal of Quentin Johnston, is that what if like everything aligns and comes together, then you're right. Then you have a Calvin Johnson Megatron light type receiver.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, what if he has a more sophisticated release package than what he showed on tape at TCU? What if he can form a quarterback wide receiver connection like Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, or Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs? It's like, if he can do that, that is then he's the clear number 1 wide receiver in this class.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big if he can do that or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, who do you have at your number 2 spot?
So I have Jordan Addison as number 2 in this receiving class, and he's grown on me a lot since I've started to look at this a lot more. And a lot of it too is just his consistent production, as I mentioned earlier, amongst 2 different programs, 2 different coaching styles, 2 different QBs, both of which are going to be NFL caliber QBs. And so Caleb Williams arguably could be first overall pick next year in next year's draft. And he's done what I really like in receiver is he's really good about running, creating space. And man, we've seen the production from what we've seen as well, just with different systems. So I think he's very versatile to the system and can learn and grow within the system that he gets drafted by. Some of the issues, the reason why he's not number 2 is some of the issues that you talked about earlier. His size seems to be beaten up on the ball, beaten up a little bit at times, and not getting a clear break if someone gets hands on him. And I think that's an area in which he can improve. That combined with his weight seems to be an issue. Now, Devontae Smith, that was a concern of his, and that has not been an issue at all for him and the Eagles. He is amazing at getting off the ball and not getting touched and creating space from the snap. And I think Addison can learn that and do that because he's got the speed. Ran a 4.49, so I think there is some good speed there.
Yeah,
that would be the reason why I think he's not above JSN for me.
Yeah, my big thing is I think on tape he has better football speed. However, when you see that 4.49 number at 5'11", 173 pounds, I think you're wanting a little more there in that
Yeah.
in that breakaway speed department. And I think that's some teams might struggle with that, and he could fall.
And that's a good point too about like the football game speed. I think there is something to be said, and maybe this is something that I just always thought about. But like I grew up playing tennis, and I always felt like I was super quick having to go back and forth, and felt like when I'm playing the game and I had to chase down a ball, felt like I could get to every single one. But then if we just ran in a straight line, like in a foot race, and there's nothing to chase, just like how quickly can you run? I always felt like I was never going as fast as I truly could. So I'm like, I say that because if you're running a go route and then like there's a 60-yard Hail Mary bomb, it just seems like maybe you're able to find an extra gear that you just don't know how to do when you're just running in a straight line. And I think that game speed, I'm very curious if that actually even makes any sense. So please leave a comment. Or if I sound crazy. But I think that there is a difference between game speed and then just running in like just a combine straight line speed.
No, I mean, I agree. I think some of his game speed comes from his elusiveness and his ability to separate in short areas. Mm-hmm. I just think he might have shown enough speed on film to be faster than defensive backs, while in reality he might not have been as fast as we had hoped he had been. So, and some of that is just expectation. So, but let's go ahead. Let's move on to both of our number one wide receivers in this draft class, and that is Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I mean, besides top end speed, he's the best route runner in this class. He has the best hands in this class. He can win at all three levels of the field. He's 6'1", 194 pounds. So size is a complete check. I think that's about as perfect size-wise as you want a guy to be.
Yeah.
And it's just the only thing that I can think of. He doesn't have that top-end gear that really sets him apart or separates himself from both players on and off the field. So,
yeah. And I don't think that you have to have that to be a number one receiver in the league. And that's going to be kind of his role. Is he's going to be a slot receiver. I think he can play outside a little bit, and you can move him around just because of how great of a route runner he is and his versatility to create space from the snap of the ball and not get really any hands on him that might slow him down. It's that combined with everything you said, with Quentin Johnston, that like we haven't seen if he's able to do that, where he can read a corner or where he can see if he can find space and everything. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he's done it. He's done it to perfection. On top of it, too, he was the best receiver on a team where there's Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave were both taken in the top 16 picks in last year's draft, and he was the best receiver in that class. I think and that's where I go. Injuries happen. People get banged up. I think he has recovered from that hamstring injury, as we have seen with the 3-cone drill and with the shuttle drill, and also seeing him run some routes as well. I think that he would be a top 10 pick this year if he wasn't hurt this entire season.
I agree.
Well. I think you can make an argument that Ohio State would have been the number one team and probably won the national championship last year if he was playing, because it just would have what C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. were able to do. And then who was the other receiver?
I forget. He has a
he is the double E initials. Anyways, but then with him on the field as well, that offense would have almost been, I think, unstoppable. It would have been unstoppable. They would have scored on almost every possession just because he was able to get so much space and create so much opportunity for the offense to just continue to get first downs 10 yards at a time, 15 yards at a time. And I think that's kind of underrated in today's NFL because it feels like everyone's looking for that over-the-top speed, the guy that can just break a touchdown whenever they want. And that's great. I'm not saying that that's bad. But then the ability to just get open, I think sometimes people forget how important that is, even though he might run a 4.7 40.
He is going to be a quarterback's best friend at the next level.
Yeah.
I think even if Jaxon Smith-Njigba runs a 4.6 flat, which is that's pretty below average for NFL wide receivers. Most guys run in the low 4.5s, right? High 4.4s, low 4.5s. If Jaxon Smith-Njigba can run a 4.6, he will be a quarterback's best friend because he will get open so fast. He'll create separation underneath and he'll suck down those safeties. But his ability to just get open so quickly, he'll be a quarterback's binky.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you say that. Sorry, could you throw out 4.6 as a number? If he ran a 4.6 exactly, he would have. I'm not sure what the exact number is of receivers that did it, but he would have been in the bottom 7 receivers.
Yeah,
the 40-yard dash of about 40 receivers.
Michael Thomas ran a 4.6. Drake London, the Falcons draft pick last year, ran like a 4.67, which is tremendously slow. But both of those guys are extremely polished route runners, and they have very consistent hands. And jury's still out a little bit on Drake London, but he had a really good rookie season, especially had a really good last few games to close it out. And I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba is next in line for the next slow guy in the NFL that is just breaking ankles and catching 100 balls for 1,200 yards.
Yeah.
So
it's funny to hear you and I, like two armchair quarterbacks who are growing dad bods, like talk about like, oh, this guy's slow.
I went to the gym today. Talk for yourself.
I go golfing. But talk about it's like, oh, this guy's slow. If he runs a 4.6, that's good. And I'm like, man, I don't even think I could break the 6 seconds in a 20-yard dash.
So one of my buddies was trying to walk on to the Georgia Southern football team, and so I was helping him doing like some footwork drills and stuff out at the rack, and I ran a 4.6 7.40 at like 225 pounds
on a 30-yard field.
No, on a 40-yard field.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was 40 yards. I ran a 4.67.
There you go.
So
there you go. Are you going to be at next year's combine?
Hey, if this thing takes off, maybe. So
maybe
maybe
subscribe and we will
like and subscribe.
We'll do the 40-yard dash at the Indianapolis Colts stadium at the NFL combine. What's it? It's not Lucas Oil Stadium anymore.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was.
Oh, it is. It is because it's the RCA Dome was the last one. So I was thinking that was Lucas Oil Stadium. So yeah. It's going to be fun. I think the receiving class is very interesting. A lot of interesting positions. Your running backs crazy. It's where do running backs fall? Where do Robinson fall?
Corner.
Yeah. QB. Honestly, this is a very intriguing
class. I think it's really deep.
Yeah. Well, and then now, honestly, and then you're throwing in Jalen Carter's situation as well, which is only going to make that more interesting. So this is
rusher also is very good.
This is a very intriguing draft. Especially this is our third draft that we've done on this channel. The first one was the Trevor Lawrence year. And that was like very cookie cutter. It's like everything was told to us essentially for like the first.
We almost got like the first 15 picks correct.
Everybody almost got the first 15 picks of the draft. Like I don't think anyone saw Justin Fields getting the Bears trading up to go get Justin Fields. So like maybe they were off a little bit there. But even then, like everyone knew like if Mac Jones is at 15 with the Patriots, they're going to take
too much sense.
It just makes too much. Yeah, it makes too much sense. So,
but I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the Tracy Take. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is both of our wide receiver one going into the NFL draft. However, I still will stand by the fact that there is not a true generational wide receiver in this draft class. It's more of do you like a big X receiver? Do you like a versatile slot Z receiver option, or do you value a true home run hitter in Zay Flowers? And to me, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how this wide receiver draft class gets taken and in what order and what situations they go into. And if you want to stick around here and join our community and hear what we think after this draft class gets drafted, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and hit that bell notification so Tyler and I can send you a notification every time we post new content. And other than that, we will